The Empower Hour series was created for all of the women out there who have done everything they were supposed to do in life and are struggling to discover what's next. I see you. You know there's so much more out there, but you just don't know how to align with what's next for you. Well, you're not going to struggle anymore. It's time for you to create your new path and fall in love with your life over and over again. See that badass woman over there who has discovered what's next for her? Let's go ask her to share how she did it and become inspired. And if she can discover what's next, so can you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Empower Hour series. Thank you for tuning into another episode. I am Suzanne Orlando, and today we have an amazing guest, Carly Chamerlik. And Carly has a really interesting story because the pandemic completely impacted her career as a flight attendant. And instead of it throwing her completely off course, it empowered her to get back into her passion and create a business that she otherwise may not have been able to create. So Carly, welcome here to our show. I'm so excited to have you here to share your story.
Hi, Suzanne. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So why don't you start off by talking about, so you shared that you're a flight attendant. So do you want to start with the beginning of that career and how you got into being a flight attendant?
Sure. Yeah, it's a really fun career. It's been so great being a flight attendant, but I started at the end of 2018, so not really all that long ago. I've only been in the industry for a couple of years now, but so I got on a little bit late, I would say. A lot of flight attendants that were in my onboarding group, they were at the very beginning of their careers. They're like 20, 21, 22. And I was turning 26, I believe, at the time that I was in training. And so I just had come out of a bunch of different careers or job opportunities that I had for several months at a time and just couldn't really nail down what it was I wanted to do. But I have some family that are flight attendants and pilots. And so I'd seen kind of the lifestyle of being a flight attendant or being an in-flight crew member. And it was just really appealing to me to just be able to go places and see different things and work with interesting people. And so that's really what drew me to the career in the first place. And I just applied, and it's honestly a really difficult thing to get into because it's so competitive. So I applied 2 years prior, made it through several rounds of interviews with multiple companies and didn't get the job. And so then 2 years later, I came back, applied again, and I got in. So it took more preparation than I think I was anticipating. But it's been an amazing career to have, definitely.
That's awesome. And I even love that part of the story where you said that 2 years prior to starting your career, you had applied and hadn't been accepted. You had applied. And so rather than having that, oh, this might not be for me and trying to explore something else, that didn't stop you from reapplying and getting back to it. Because it sounds like it's something that you really wanted to proceed with, and it's something that you really wanted to do. So I love that piece of your personality. Was there a time in that 2-year span where you wanted to give up, or you were wondering if it was for you?
Oh, definitely. I mean, when I first was applying, I think before that, I hadn't really tried applying for any jobs that were very difficult to get. So I was used to getting what I wanted, and I was used to getting the jobs that I wanted. And so when I didn't get it, I took it very personally at first. It was just, I was younger. I was pretty fresh out of school. And I just had this mentality of like, oh, well, if they don't want me, then I must not be meant to do that. So I did go explore other things, and I worked in marketing for a time, and I worked retail, and I was running social media for a company, and I did all kinds of different things. But then that was still really pulling at me. It was just, there was something about it that it really resonated with me. And I think mostly it was the idea of, I associated some kind of freedom with it, where just going wherever you wanted. And I was working these office jobs or these regularly interval schedule kind of jobs where I was showing up at the same place. I was doing the same thing. And I think what appealed to me so much about even just the idea of being a flight attendant was that freedom to go different places and to, like, no 2 days look the same. You're working on different planes. You're going to new destinations. So I think that always just was kind of a seed planted that it brought me back to it a couple years later, even though it didn't work out the first time. And actually, this is funny. I wasn't even going to tell this story, but I applied to one airline that I really wanted. It was my top choice. And I would like check every couple of months to see if they were hiring, and they weren't. And they eventually were hiring, but they were only hiring language speakers. So I applied as a French language speaker because I had studied French in school. I studied it for about 5 years. And so I thought, okay, well, I know enough. I'm definitely not fluent, but I was like, I know enough that I could fake my way through the interview, and then they'll love me and they'll want to hire me, and they'll tell me like, go work on your French. It's fine. We'll bring you on as an English speaker. But that was my very optimistic view, because big airlines don't do that. Like, if you say you can speak French, you better speak French. But that did get me pretty far. I made it to the last round of interviews, and then they were like, oh, wait, you can't actually speak French very well. But I was persistent.
Yeah, but even that persistence, right? So seeing that this is an airline that I really wanted to apply to and work for, and they were only hiring language speakers. I do have some experience. Let me throw my hat in the ring. But even the fact, even if you didn't land that particular job, you didn't let that deter you, and you found kind of a way to navigate through that because you saw a possibility there, which I think is so inspirational. Because a lot of times people would see that and be like, well, nope, I don't qualify for that. So let me just walk away from it. But you didn't see it. You saw it differently. And even though it didn't pan out the way that you anticipated, you still got pretty far, right?
Yeah, I did. I was kind of surprised. I went through like 3 or 4 interviews, and it wasn't until the interview that was entirely in French that it was like, okay, I got to tap out. But so yeah, I didn't get on with that airline, but I did get on with my second choice airline. That's still like an amazing company, an amazing place to work. And both of them are legacy carriers. So because I'm still current with my airline, I'm not allowed to like say who I work for, but sure. It is a national carrier, and I travel internationally for them. And so it's a super fun place to work.
That's great. And again, I'm such a firm believer in the path that you took towards the other airline that you did that the last interview was fully in French, right? I'm a firm believer that if that didn't happen the way it did, you might not have, the other position that you now hold might not have been materialized. Who knows, right? Who knows if that's true or not? No, but I'm a firm believer in one step leads to the next.
Yeah, I totally can agree with that. I especially think because since I had gone through the interviews 2 years previously and didn't make the cut, then I was better prepared. Then I think that's what kind of gave me the confidence to go for that French speaking position. But then even that, just going through all of those interviews kind of refreshed my interview skills. And I was going through both companies' rounds of interviews at the same time. So I was getting practice going through one while that ended up landing me the other one, I think. So I can totally agree with that.
Absolutely. And that perspective, right? That perspective of this shaped this interview, gave me that experience of being in an interview that kind of enabled me to get into that next step, which is so important to look at things through that kind of a lens, right? Because you could have looked at it through a completely different lens, and you chose not to do that. So talk about, you land the career as a flight attendant that you'd been longing to do for many, many years. And all of a sudden we get hit with the biggest, if you want to call obstacle, or the biggest pivot in probably most of our lives, right? We get hit with this pandemic, which we know had a huge impact on the airline industry as a whole. So talk to us about the beginning when that all started and how that impacted you, because that's a huge turning point for your story here.
Right. It is. Yeah. So the airlines were just, I had no intention of leaving, and I was definitely, as everyone was, just shocked at everything and how it came out. And it kind of felt like one day the world was normal and the next day it wasn't. And my boyfriend of 5 years, he was in Bulgaria at the time for work, and he was supposed to be there for 6 months, but then we were sitting at home, or I was sitting home alone and was watching the news and how I think the president was talking about the borders were going to close, and it was going to be very difficult to get in and out of Europe. So I was calling him, but he's asleep because it's the middle of the night in Bulgaria. And so I booked him a ticket home, and just thankfully, because I have flight benefits, it was like a cheaper ticket. But I was calling him and leaving messages like, hey, check the news, you're coming home. So it was just a weird time. And then from there, we live in Chicago, but we spent just a few days in Chicago once he got back, trying to figure out like, how is this going to go? What's it going to look like? And we just decided like, we better get somewhere that's a little less in the thick of things. Like, we're in the middle of Chicago in the city. And so we ended up driving to Tennessee, where my parents live, and ended up spending 2 months there, because it was just, we thought it was going to be 2 weeks. And then it was just, it just never ended. So we were there for 2 months, but in that time I was still an active flight attendant, but the flying just stopped. So that week that we decided to go to Tennessee, I am very junior in the company, and it's entirely based on seniority, like how your schedule works. So I am on call, and I know the days that I'm going to be on call, but I don't know necessarily when I'm going to fly next.
Okay.
So at the time I was on call, I had about a week left in the month of on-call days, but we were just like, this is feeling weird. We don't know like what the world's about to look like. So we just thought we better get out of there. And we went to Tennessee, and I didn't get a call all week long. And then I don't know, we were just kind of rolling the dice, and I was like, I guess I could call out sick or try to commute. Flight attendants often commute from the other side of the country or wherever they live, and will go to their base. So I figured I could fly out of Nashville and get back to Chicago if I had to, but they just didn't need me. And then after that, they started offering leaves of absence, and you could accept that and keep basically all your benefits, all your health and flight benefits and all of that, but just not be paid and not be on the schedule. So I took a month off in April, and but a lot of my friends were still flying technically, but they didn't get called. Like, I don't think any of them got called like one time. They were all just sitting all month long, not getting used. So that's when I started to see like, this is not going to be a fast recovery. Like, flights just bottomed out. Like, we were only flying, I think it was by like May, or maybe it was a little later in the summer, my airline was operating about 30% of their total flights that they would normally be flying. And we just knew like, this is not something you're going to bounce back from very, very quickly. So we started kind of making other plans. And I was actually at the beginning of the year, before COVID was really even a thing, it was back in like January, I had started learning how to build websites. And I had a little bit of a background doing that for myself, but I was wanting to learn how to be able to do it really well and potentially make money from it. And so I was learning about blogging and SEO and marketing, and I'd worked at a marketing company before, so I had a little bit of experience in that as well. So all of that just was kind of something I was doing in my free time. And the winter is very slow in the airlines. So that's kind of just, I had this free time in the winter, but then the free time never stopped. And then and so I was in this position where after April, I did go back and put myself back on the schedule, and I was making my regular paycheck again, but I still was not flying. I was getting called maybe once a month, up until we were furloughed at the end of September. So it was like very little. I think I flew like 2 times all summer, which is crazy. Normally I'm clocking in about 100 flight hours a month in the summer. And I was down to like 4, maybe on a good day.
Wow.
So it was just, it was crazy, but they are required to pay us a minimum amount each month. So it's funny. I was actually reflecting on this morning. Like on one hand, nothing about the pandemic is good. And like, that has been very traumatic and tragic in many ways for pretty much everyone.
Right.
But on the other hand, I think it's one of the best things that could have happened to me, because without it, I would have continued flying for who knows how long. I wouldn't have had the time and the resources and the opportunity to sit back and grow the business that I now have, that I wouldn't have had the luxury of time without being furloughed because I was getting this paycheck, but I was not working.
Right.
So I was in a weird, fortunate position to be getting paid my full paycheck and not have to do anything in exchange for that. So I had the luxury of time essentially to build what I wanted to build.
Which is so incredible. And I love the stories that I hear about how, again, we talked about this when you were going through the interview process, or when you were that perspective, right? You could, of course, the pandemic is so devastating in so many ways, but your perspective of, instead of, oh my gosh, I what am I going to do with all this time, or I'm not flying, or I'm not getting, paid what I used to get paid, and what's going to happen, and that setting into that panic mode, which I'm sure was there on some level, but looking at it almost as an opportunity that now I'm almost given this gift of time, and I have this gift of time that I can do and pour into this however I want to pour into it, and look at all of these things that I've wanted to build, or these passions that I've had, that now I have the opportunity to pour into these in a way that I never would have had it not been for the pandemic. So I always call those like the silver linings that happen, that we should be, when we switch our perspective and we see things through different lenses, that the perspective and the point of view and the gift of time that we have now is can enable us to do so many different things. So take us to that piece of it. So you talked about website building and marketing and things like that. So take us to how that unfolded for you.
Sure. So, like I said, the first round of furloughs was the end of September. So I saw that writing on the wall since the spring, pretty much, when I was in Tennessee, but didn't get the official notice until about July. And then it was really July, I kind of hit the ground running and decided, okay, I've got to really take things seriously now. So I found a business coach, and I still am in her group coaching program. So it's just, I get like weekly check-ins with this whole group of women that are doing the same thing. And I think that really was super motivating for me, especially in the beginning, to just stop feeling like I have all these pieces of things that I want to do and I don't know how to do them and how they fit together, and not having someone else in my life that was doing the same thing I was doing. It really, really helped to plug myself into that community of people with a similar goal or a similar mission. And so that was very foundational for me, was that piece of it. But then from there, I filed for my LLC in October. And so that also kind of put this stamp of like officiality on it of this is my business and I'm taking it seriously. I think before, I've always been very entrepreneurial, but I think that in other things I tried in the past, I treated them more as hobbies. And so I think for me, I could see the value in the LLC, but I think there's a lot of personal value in it for me as well, of putting that money out there to declare myself as a business so that there's like official record out in the world that of my intentions, because it can be really easy to say like, I'm starting a business. And then if you go in as a sole proprietor, that can work for a lot of people. And that got me to a point where I could file as an LLC. But I think for me, staying as a sole proprietor, it would have been easier for me to put things on the back burner, or to like set that aside and kind of like forget that I'm a business owner. So I think that helped give me perspective as well. And I just started taking on clients wherever I saw a need. So it started out with just friends. Like a friend was starting a podcast and she needed some branding done. So I was like, I can do that. So and needed a monthly blog post written. And I was like, I can do that. So, and she's actually still my client now. We've been working together about 6 months now. And then another friend, she's a photographer and she wanted someone to run her Instagram and Facebook accounts. So I was doing that. And it was just kind of anywhere I saw a need. I wasn't sure what services or what my service menu was that I wanted to provide just yet. But anytime a job came up that I felt like I could do well, I would take it. And that definitely helped me refine, like, okay, so I don't love running social media. That's noted. And I will not be doing that. Like, just because I'm good at it doesn't mean it has to be on my permanent roster of services. Yeah. But it did help me get my feet wet and also start interacting with people that were in the space that I wanted to be in. So from there, I did start tailoring my services more to the things that I loved and the things that I saw I could get clients for in a more consistent manner. So right now I'm offering, my primary service is photography. So I do have a background in photography, and I did my bachelor's degree in fine art. And so that's kind of like the really fun piece for me, is the visual creative stuff. So I've been offering photography for personal brands, and I just recently started doing product photography as well. So I'm kind of exploring that now as another thing that I can offer. But my best paying clients and the majority of my clients have been web design. So I've been building websites as well, which kind of goes back to what I was learning this time last year, of just putting websites together and learning how to do that really well.
Yeah.
So I just started seeing needs and trying to fill them, essentially.
I love that. And I want to go back, because one of the things that I think is so key here, right, is you recognize that there might have been all of these things that you wanted to do, and you saw the value of investing in a business coach who could help to guide you. And essentially that became a community for you, where you saw other people who were putting together their own businesses through that business coach, through that community, and started to be inspired by other people as well. And so I think that's an obstacle that so many people, particularly women, right? I think we're kind of, it's kind of ingrained in us, whether it's directly or indirectly, that we're supposed to know how to do everything or figure everything out. Or a lot of us like have that, like, I should be able to do this on my own or figure this out, or I have a friend who does this, but not seeing the value sometimes, or in investing in somebody who, you know what, maybe I need to hire a business coach to do this, because wherever I have all these skills, I need to know where to focus those skills, or what to do, or what the next steps could be. So I love the fact that even in the pandemic, right, when you were in a position where you didn't have that consistent income that you once had because of everything that was going on, but you still saw the worth and the value in hiring and investing in a business coach who could help get you kind of directed in a certain space, in a certain way, right? And I think, and it didn't sound like there was. Well, let me ask you this: was there a reluctance or hesitancy to invest in the business coach at that point?
Oh yeah. I mean, I didn't even know that much about her. She was just someone, I cannot remember how I got connected with her, but I got connected with her somehow only about a month or two before I actually signed up for her program. And it was a big investment for me, and it was scary, especially because I didn't know what my income was going to look like. And actually at the time, my understanding was I'm going to be furloughed in September. My pay will run out at the end of October, and I've got to like have this thing off the ground. And now, fortunately, I'm actually going into my third round of furloughs. So they brought me back and furloughed me and brought me back. But with all of that, I had no pay gap, which is just crazy. Like no gap in insurance, no gap in my pay. And, but thinking that my pay was going to run out on this deadline did put a fire under my butt to like really get things off the ground. And so at the time when I signed up for her, I thought I only have a few months left of consistent income and I'm going to have to figure this out. And actually she only on her website, she only had one payment option to pay in full. And I actually messaged her and I was like, hey, you don't know me yet, but like, I'm good for it. I just like, it's a lot for me. And this is what I'm going through. And she was like, oh, totally. I'll go set up like a monthly payment option for you right now. And so I was able to pay it off, I think over like 4 months. So just by asking for what I needed, I was able to get what I wanted. So that was also a good lesson for me. Like, what's the worst she could say? It's just no, like you have to pay in full. So I thought, the heck, I'm going to ask. And I know that and now as someone who is like growing a business and I have now products and courses and things that are not to that caliber necessarily price wise, but as someone who has a course and I can see like, okay, if I could see that this person really wants it, and like, I'm not going to say, no, you can't give me money for this thing you really want. Like I would also want to help them get that if I could see that it could benefit them. So that was a good lesson for me too, as a business owner.
Absolutely. And it's that old adage, right? If you don't ask the question, you're never going to know what the answer is. And what's the worst that she could have said? nope, I only accept full payments. Okay, that's great. But the fact that you asked and the fact that she met you where you were, and now you kind of use that mantra going forward, that you price out your programs for whatever they are. But if somebody really is invested and wants to do it, you're going to find a way for them to work with you, which is so, I think that's incredible that you're able to do that, because that's how you started, right? That's how you got involved too. And I love this entire story. And I love that, you know, through your process, and especially that you were anticipating, holy cow, like I'm getting paid through the fall and I don't know what's going to happen after that. And rather than, you know, oftentimes we get so paralyzed by our fear and the unknown, and oh my gosh, what if this happens, or what if I fail, or what if I you know, I invest all this money and it doesn't come back to me. And we get so caught up in those what ifs that it prevents us from moving forward with anything. And it sounds like that was a reality for you. You did not know. You were anticipating that this was going to be, you know, come fall, like I have to get this up and going because I'm not going to have another source of income, you know. But and I'm a huge believer in this, and I don't know where you fall in this, but my belief is when we truly believe something is going to happen, or we truly are invested in something, or we're aligned with our process, that the universe hears us and has things kind of unfold for us the way they're meant to unfold. And from hearing your story, it sounds like because you had such belief in your process and belief in the investment you were making in this coach, and knowing that, okay, this is something that I've been wanting to do and this is the time to do it, and this is the perspective that I have, and I'm going to pursue this and I'm going to make this happen, that it's almost like everything aligned for you the way in which it was supposed to align. And look, you never, the income loss that you anticipated having in the fall, it never came to fruition. Everything continued in the way that it was supposed to continue. So I am a strong believer that because you had that mindset going for you, and you had that belief in what you were pursuing and doing, that everything just kind of aligned the way in which it was supposed to align for you.
Yeah, definitely. And yes, I agree with you 100%. I believe in God. I talk to God all the time. I think ever since I was little, I've asked for wisdom. That's like one of my biggest things that I've always come back to, is like, give me wisdom, give me clarity, help me, like help guide me in this, because I can't see past the physical. So I need help in the spiritual. And so I think with this specifically, I saw, or some part of me understood, that if this investment works, if I get the promised result, I will make my investment back and then some. And yeah. So if I don't put myself forward and make this investment or take this risk, then the result could be that I keep floundering around and not having clear direction and not being able to accomplish the things I want to accomplish, because I haven't taken on the tools that I need in order to get the result that I'm looking for. So I think at some point you've got to weigh like the cost and the risk versus the possible benefits and the possible outcome, and just understand that it's an investment you're choosing to make. It's not money you're choosing to spend. You're not like blowing it on a fancy vacation and then you come home and your life is the same. It's like you're putting that money into something because you see the potential for the return. So it was a big moment of growth for me to just have the faith that this is going to work out the way that it's supposed to. And I had a good feeling about it. I had a peace about it, that I just knew like, this is not going to be money that I'm wasting. I'm going to get something out of this.
Absolutely. And that's a theme that I hear over and over again. The interviews that I'm doing here for this show, and even the women that come into the program that the coaching program that I do that helps them align with what's next for them, is that that willingness to, I know that I'm trusting my gut. I know that making this investment might feel really scary and it might feel like a huge thing, but I know that this is the choice that I want to make. I don't want to push this aside and keep pushing this down, because I don't want to be wondering what if, and I don't want to be living with, okay, I should have taken that step, or I should have done that. I'm going to trust this process. And I think that's huge to be able to align with that space as you've been sharing. I think that's definitely something that when you have that gut instinct and trusting that you're making the choice that's best for you. And I love your point that you're making, Carly, too, about how you can certainly, there's so many ways you can spend money. There's so many things that you can, and look, I think if somebody wants to go on a great big vacation, that's awesome. If somebody wants to buy that designer handbag, that's awesome. But looking at, instead of I'm spending all this money on a coach, or I'm spending all this money on a program, or I'm spending all this money on a website. No, you're investing in what's going to happen. You're investing in your learning process. You're investing in your business, and it's going to grow from there, versus I'm investing in a purse and it's going to sit in my closet and I'm going to take it out. And that's great and all well and good if that's what you're aligned with. But there's so much value in investing in yourself here, right? Because it's going to take you onto such a different path. And if you can see it through that lens, it's so worth it. And even if maybe investment doesn't mean a financial investment. Maybe investment means sacrificing your time in a different way, or sacrificing or investing in my gut instinct, and just, I'm going to work through the fear, and I'm going to work through the obstacles, because I know that if I could get to what's on the other side of this, I'm going to be in such a better headspace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And I do agree with you too, that it's, for someone, buying a really expensive handbag could totally be like life-changing in a different way for them. Cause that is something that's like on my list. Like when I hit this milestone, that's like a fun thing I want to do.
It's a reward, right?
It is. Yeah. So there's definitely nothing wrong with that, or nothing wrong with a vacation. And I think there's also some balance to strike with the personal development stuff too, because now that I've invested in this coaching program that works for me, I'm going to ride it out until I feel like I need to level up and do something different. But for now, like, I'm sticking with what I've already invested my time and money into, because I see it working and it still fits where I'm at. But I think that sometimes we can also get course overwhelm, where we try to buy all of the things because all the promised results look really good. So it's also an exercise in restraint to just like stick with what you've already committed to.
Yes, I agree with that. We see that all over the place, right? And everything. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody has a unique, different coaches have unique things that they bring to the table. And maybe the coach that you have didn't have that, but I love that you said that the course overwhelm, right? That there could be elements of things, oh my gosh, and there's always that FOMO, but sticking to what you know and sticking to what you invest in and writing that out. And then, getting to a point, personal growth is always something that we should be looking for. And when I get to a point where I've done all of the things and maybe I need to level up and do something different, then maybe I look to a different avenue. But because we can get caught up in all of everything that's offered out there, because there's so many awesome programs, right? We just have to find what align and what works for us, for sure.
Right. So that, in saying that, really what I meant to, the point I forgot to make was that just because you're buying a course doesn't mean that's a better investment than buying a vacation.
That's right.
Yeah, like exactly what you're saying. Just, you've got to kind of weigh what is aligned for you at that time. And maybe it's a coaching program, and maybe it is a design or something. So,
yeah. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So as people are listening and there are people out there listening and they're saying, oh my gosh, I'm totally relating to everything that's going on. I'm totally relating to what Carly is saying here. What is, if you could drop, you've dropped so many gems, if you could drop like a solid gem, and if anything else, our listeners can walk away with something that you found through your process that you're totally aligned with, a piece of advice, a piece of inspiration that you could share with our viewers. What is it that you would share with them?
So many things I could say.
I know it's a hard question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think the best advice that I have been given in this past year of my own journey of starting and launching a business, my mom told me, I don't remember what this was in relation to, but she said, take the next right step, figure out what the next right one thing to do is, because we can get really overwhelmed with all of the mountains of things that we want to tackle and accomplish. But the danger there is that you can get paralyzed and not do anything at all. So this is something that I've experienced in my past as well, of being a self-proclaimed perfectionist and wanting everything to be just right, wanting all the best conditions in order to move forward, and then wanting like the absolute best possible result every time. But that's not reality. And we also cannot possibly know the outcome of any of our combinations of our choices until we are at the end. So in saying that you want something and in setting this big lofty goal, it's great to have that future perspective and to look ahead to what you want so that you know where you're going, but you also have to be willing to be flexible and just do the next right thing. So maybe the next right step was not something that you mapped out in this big grand plan, and it may be something that you never thought of doing before, but it may just fit at the right time. And so you've just got to be willing to be flexible, to keep your perspective forward, and to always have something that you are working toward, but to also be flexible in the details and not get bogged down by all the things that quote unquote have to be done, because nothing necessarily has to be done one way. So there's always going to be different ways to get to your end result. And I think for me, being flexible and willing to try and willing to ask questions has really served me well, and not getting kind of tied down to one result.
I love that. And I love that your mom had instilled that wisdom in you, and that it's that the taking the next right step for you is what you need to align with. And even going back to what you said, which is so paramount, that there might not ever be a right time. Most often people will say, well, when this happens, then I'll do this, or I'm not quite ready yet, or I'm not. And I think that that's a farce. I think that that imagining that you'll ever be ready, or there'll ever be a right time, might not be the case. It just has to, it's just what am I willing to do at this point? What am I sick of in my life, and what am I willing to change and accept and see? Maybe it's not what I envisioned for myself, but what am I opening myself up to receive, right? And maybe it's something that I never would have envisioned for myself, but maybe it's exactly what I should be looking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So as listeners are hearing you speak, Carly, how can people, if people are looking to, align with what you're offering, whether it's through the photography space, the brand photography, things like that, or people are looking to connect with you in terms of building their brand or their websites and things like that, how can people get in touch with you? What is the best way? And we're going to include all of these links in this video as well, but just verbally, what is the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, thank you so much. So everything is under the umbrella of carlychamerlik.com, but because my last name is kind of difficult to both pronounce and spell, I also have a couple easier domains to find. So, and I'm also on Instagram at carlychamerlik, but my other domains where you can find me, I have a branding course that is all about how to build your personal brand. And that is just now launching. It's going to be launching actually in April. So I think by the time this airs, it'll be live and available.
Yes.
I just finished my beta testing period for it. So I'm really excited about that. So that can be found at brandingboutiquecourse.com. And then I also have links to my brand photography and all of that at brandingwithcarly.com.
Awesome. So glad. And I love how everything is aligned and lining up for that, right? So by the time this video is launched, everything will be live for you, and that will hopefully bring you some awesome abundance as you move forward.
Thank you so much for lining this up so perfectly. I'm really excited.
Of course. So thank you so much, Carly, for sharing your time and space and energy here with us on Empower Hour. I'm sure that you provided inspiration to so many out there, and appreciate everything that you've shared and your time here today. And if you guys have heard what Carly is talking about, certainly get in touch with her if you're interested in reconnecting with her after this video. And if you guys are in a space and you're hearing what Carly's saying and you're saying, I am just so stuck and I want to find a way to figure out what's next for me the way that Carly has for her, definitely click on the link below so that you can schedule a clarity call with me so that we can discover what's next for you. And don't forget, guys, that just because that you've done everything you're supposed to do in life does not mean that you've done everything that you're meant to do. Thank you so much for your time and energy, and we look forward to seeing you here on the next episode. Bye, everybody.